So we've stumbled upon our topic for today. Your worst car accident or your worst car fortune. Like you should have gotten in an accident, but you didn't. This was in college days with Josie, and we are heading to a gospel sing. You would only know that if you are from the Midwest, but we were driving like an hour or two away to go to like a small country church where they would sing starting from, I don't know, like 6, 7 p.m. till midnight, 1 o'clock. And so you would bring your own instrument and you would sing, and then you would go down, and then another family would come up and they would sing. So we were going to this gospel sing.
Is this like your college said?
No.
You have to go, or is
somebody
this
invited us?
You sought out and
no, someone invited us.
Okay, and you couldn't come up with an excuse.
It was actually really cool. Like it's cool. So the crazy thing is we were going on an on-ramp, and I guess I had been watching too much Need for Speed or Fast and Furious, and I remember
there's only like what 20 of those now.
I remember like very vividly one of the guys that was in my life that was older than me. I remember him saying, if you accelerate through the turn, the car will hug the road and it will be exhilarating. And so I'm like, Josie, and we couldn't have been married for 6 months. I'm like, Josie, I'm going to accelerate through this turn. So we're going like 30, 40, 50, 60. We get up to 70 miles an hour through this ramp. Oh, no. And I lose control of the car, and we're just spinning and spinning and spinning. And all we see is like what's in front of us, what's behind us, what's in front of us, what's behind us, 5 or 6 turns. And then we end up in the dead center of the interstate of a 4-lane highway. Prayerfully, nobody was on it.
Like when you say in the middle, was there like a grass in the middle that you ended up in?
No. Like in the middle of 4 lanes.
So that you got taken up too?
So it's like this thing going on, and we're accelerating the turn. I lose, and we're doing this, and now we're in the middle of a highway. Like stopped.
So I have
and
actually.
It was so scary.
The worst wreck that I've been a part of was I was driving in a minivan with some friends. We were going to some concert or something, and I was in the back seat, and we were driving in a neighborhood, kind of like a neighborhood like what we live in, where it's not a super busy street, and we didn't have a stop sign, but the cross street did have a stop sign. And we're going through a cross street, and all I see out of the corner of my eye over here is a big, massive brown UPS truck not stopping and coming directly T-boned us at the side.
And you were in the middle?
In the middle. And I'm like just staring.
Praise the Lord for the middle.
The whole way. Like, oh my, this thing, like it was crazy.
That's Final Destination stuff. We gonna die.
I would say 6 months to a year. Like I had PTSD about cars. Like even like coming to.
Is that why you flinch when the UPS guy shows up at church?
But that was crazy. That was the worst wreck I've been a part of.
Robert?
I have not been in a car accident. And I'm trying to think. I'm making sure. I'm not going to share probably the closest that I ever came because it wouldn't be a good story. It might discourage some people from certain things that we want to encourage them to do.
What does that mean?
All right. It was share.
It was foreign country, foreign roads.
On a chicken bus?
We're just going to leave it at that.
Chicken bus? Hey, you should sign up for a missions trip. You might come home alive.
I always have, so.
Until you don't.
True.
Hey, welcome to ACC Talk. This is Jarrell.
My name's Dave.
And I'm Rob.
Hey, and we just want to welcome you. This is just a weekly podcast where we talk about things that are either going on in the church, or we expand on sermons, or just relevant topics of the day. And today, what we want to talk to you about is coming to a middle ground. And in that middle ground, what we want to come to is between the different generations. And so we're going to talk a little bit about previous generations, current generations, and then how that kind of plays out in the church. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room. millennials. And so millennials have lots of either nicknames or they're known for certain things. And so kind of to kick this off, what are some things that you guys have heard about millennials?
I think the most often one that I've heard is that they're lazy.
Robert? He doesn't want to offend the millennials in the room.
I will say this. I am a millennial, so
I'm trying to remember if it was. I never remember where the gaps fall in on the generations, but it was funny. There was a video.
1980 on millennials. 1980 to like 2000 millennials.
Yeah, I still don't know if that was just a funny video of just some of the things that have changed. Of like somebody, I'm not sure if they're a millennial or the next generation, but the whole like folding a map, like a physical map.
My mom had a map.
A rotary phone.
trying to figure out a rotary
how
phone.
to use a rotary phone, or even they gave Ellen did this with some young lady on a show, and it was like the phone book even, like just funny to think about like those changes, like how that is just so foreign to some.
Yeah, I think most recently, what I've heard of millennials is the killers of napkins and plastic straws.
Oh my gosh!
I think another thing that I've heard of millennials that I'm not super proud of is the Tide Pod challenge. You know, back in the day when it was cool to eat a Tide Pod.
I'm not sure what
and die.
Wait a
you
second,
think that's
though.
cool.
Was that millennials or was that Generation Z?
I'm pretty sure it was millennials, but we're just going to throw that in there with the
We're just going to give it to them,
ones.
even not.
It's the young ones.
All right, so be nice in the comments. Be nice. I'm a millennial. Dave's a millennial. Rob, do you know what you are?
Oh, he's Gen X through and through.
All right.
Yeah, that's what.
Great. That's what he is. That's what he is. So be nice in the comments.
Like I said, I have no clue any of those things.
He's so Generation X that he doesn't want to be labeled Generation X.
So put some of the either things that you've heard, misconceptions, memes, any of those things in the comments about any generation. Don't just pick on the millennials.
Okay, Boomer.
Okay, Boomer.
You've been saving that one. You've been saving that one.
If you're salty in the comments, we will be salty to you.
Let me ask you this then. You talk about the finding middle ground between generations. Obviously, you can make fun. Like there's that piece maybe of that in millennials. Dive into that a little bit more. Explain what you mean. Like I would necessarily look at it and go that I feel like there's angst to me from a younger generation or an older generation. So what do you mean by that? What are we trying to maybe tackle?
Yeah, definitely. So it's probably because, and I don't mean this in a mean way, that you're not a millennial, but of the last, I don't want to say 10 years, it feels like millennials have become a punching bag. And I would say some of it's probably deserved. But I think a lot of it is millennials have gone about and changed and done things differently than the previous generation that has brought a lot of angst towards them. And so I think nobody really loves change. And so how do we find a middle ground between, boomers, Generation X, millennials, and now Gen Z, where, they're even doing things wildly different than millennials are doing. And what does that look like for us to maybe not agree on everything, but get to a place where we can really kind of love each other and maybe respect the differences between the generations. Of course, there's some things going on right now in terms of, hey, maybe it's fun, it's funny, to call millennials snowflakes and those sorts of different things where there might be angst right now between millennials and other generations. But is this a new concept? Has there ever been any other issues between generations? And maybe, what can we learn from that?
I think Pastor Rob would probably be the best person because you've...
You trying to say I'm old?
No. I was not trying to say
older
that.
than you.
Older than me. But I would say like you may have some perspective on how the generation before you talked about Generation X. Was that even like a conversation when you were growing up?
I don't remember it.
Okay.
I think that what I've watched, I think there's two things when you start talking about generations that I've seen. It's more in the sense of personal in the family. And then probably in the larger scope would be just dealing with generation gaps in the church between certain generations. And I wouldn't even necessarily classify it in terms of like millennials, boomers, or any of that. I think I would put it more in just kind of age ranges and more of kind of styles that has fallen in the church. But like just on a personal side, I think it's really interesting to watch where some tension can come between generations. My grandma, who lived to be 100 and passed away a few years ago, like I just think about her growing up. She was able to use a typewriter, it was the rotary phone, all of that stuff. And so like my parents were like, we need to get her to learn how to email, like how to use a cell phone. And I'd watch my parents get so mad at my grandma and frustrated because she couldn't grasp it. It was just like, you think about how drastic of a change that is from like where she had kind of grown up and come from to where it was when she passed away. Really wild. And my parents would get so frustrated at her. And I'd sit there and be like, she's like 99 years old. She's not going to figure that out, right? Like, just be glad she's like talking to us, right?
That story is super ironic.
And so it's like amazing, right? And so like I would sit there and I'd be that way. And I'd be like, why do they get so annoyed? Well, I find myself getting annoyed at my parents now. It's like they call with iPhone questions. And it's like, you're just like, oh, you want to bang your head. And I think part of that struggle comes, it's almost that generation that's before you or right after you is maybe where you can struggle the most with. Because like I look at it with my grandma, I was like, it's grandma. I love the lady. She's amazing. And why are you getting frustrated? She's an older lady and she doesn't get it. And I almost see that my kids can sometimes, they'll make kind of laugh like, Nana and Papa don't get how to do something. But ultimately their heart is not like, oh, like I can just get annoyed. It's like, really? How can you not know that? Like, you both are educated adults, and it's like, you should understand. It's just,
they've made it so easy. Follow the directions.
And so I think that's some of what, as I think about this and you start talking about like the generations, I think it's really hard when you especially start to see like your parents start to struggle. And maybe they're having the harder time keeping up with the change in technology. And you really start changing from your parents always being the one that you could go to ask for help or advice to now you're really having to give that to them. And I think that can create some angst and some frustration for people that is a part of that.
I think part of it is that when I go to see my grandparents, I expect them to have iPhone questions. Like I just expect it. Like I expect them to have questions about how to use the iPhone, how to set up their Wi-Fi. Like I don't expect them to know that stuff. But like when you talk about your parents, like you kind of expect them to know stuff.
Yeah. Well, they've always been there to give. They did so much guiding and teaching really as you grew up. And so there's that. So
it's good to know that this isn't like a new problem. Like it's not just millennials or young people and old people, but it's been something that's been happening for a long time. And so
you were sharing the story about the grocery store, and I thought that what you were sharing, I thought that was super interesting and kind of shows that it isn't a new problem. And
yeah,
I think
definitely.
That was interesting.
So people born in the early 1900s, pretty much if you wanted to eat something, you were going to go out to your garden and you were going to pick it. And if you had a cow or you had a pig, that was like one of those things that if you were going to eat meat, it was going to be not like a rare treat, but it wasn't going to be something like today where it's like we're eating hamburgers every night or steak every night. And so grocery stores, supermarkets started becoming really popular around 1945, 46. And that particular generation looked at the next generation like, man, like how convenient it is for you to be able to just go to a grocery store and buy whatever you want whenever you want. And so that kind of idea and thought process of laziness kind of started there back in the 1940s. And I can only imagine that it's evolved to now you order groceries on your cell phone and then they deliver it to your door. I can only imagine what they think about the laziness of Gen Z and millennials. But I think that the reality is, and Rob, you kind of addressed this with technology, is technology and information and access and availability, it's just becoming easier and easier and more plentiful every single day. And so what we can do is we can rag on it and we can call someone lazy, or we can just say, hey, my experiences growing up are different than yours. We're not all to turn off our lights and then light candles, to be able to see. Like, we embrace, the different technologies that are of the day. And we don't rag on each other just because our experiences growing up were different.
Yeah, I mean, even like my kids, like the way that they grow up is totally different. Like the idea that they can watch whatever show they want at whatever time they want was not what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Like, it was just what's on. That's what you get to watch. I didn't even have cable. So it was like whatever is on, like the 4 channels that our antenna could get.
Yeah.
That's what was on, and that's what you were going to watch. And my kids, like, they can watch anything. Like, they aren't bored.
Yeah.
They have that option to them to never be bored. And so, like, even for us as parents, like, trying to, like, navigate, how do we raise them well and still, like, because I do think that boredom piece can be important, especially in creativity and trying to problem solve and trying to work through stuff. I think having everything at your fingertips whenever you want is not always good for us as humans. And then just trying to figure out those differences and generations. I think that's interesting too.
It's interesting too. If you watch generations, there's certain things that I feel like even just for myself, if you know how to do something, there's a comfort in that, and it's good. And so, like, something new comes along, like, do I want to learn how to do that? You have to kind of make those conscious decisions to kind of stay up to date on things. And so I think, obviously, the older you get, the maybe harder that becomes to do. And so I think that's part of it, maybe, as you start looking at it. But it's interesting as you think about it, how certain innovations and changes in society people have embraced, and then also at the same time there's certain ones that they haven't. And I've seen this very clear in the church, and I talk about the church at large. I'm not talking about ACC. Just in some of my experience of how that is. It's like I've had a church experience where a church really had gotten stuck in a format, in a style that at one point was very relevant, and so they desire to see the youth, the young people in the church, but what they're doing isn't relevant to the youth of today. And so you try to talk about that, and they just don't get it. And one of those illustrations was to kind of look at the phone and talk to these people. You'd say, when you first got married, what kind of phone did you have? It's literally the rotary phone, right? And even if you go back before that, and never had to do it, I'm not that old, but like, you see those old movies of like a switchboard and people pulling wires and plugging them back in. And so that concept of, you didn't stay with that phone, the rotary came around and you loved it. You actually then learned, oh man, we can put a really long phone cord on this thing that stretches like throughout the whole house. I can walk from where this phone is attached to the wall and sit in the living room. Some of you probably have no clue.
My grandmother passed 2000.
We had quarter phones.
15-ish. She had long cords on her phone to the day that she passed away. Like, she didn't have wireless phones.
Yeah.
And she just had long cords.
But then what happened, right? And then it went wireless. And then obviously, then the innovation of the cell phone came
And then
along.
it died.
It's almost like, who has a home phone? Like, we actually have a home phone. I'm like, why do we have a home phone?
That is a good question. Why do you have a home
We never
phone?
answer it. We never do anything with it. It just sits
Telemarketers.
there. And every now and then you hear the answering machine kick on. It's like, oh, we have a phone. And so we embrace that. And so ultimately, the same desire of the phone is the same, is to be able to communicate with somebody. But obviously, the phones, there's a lot more things we can do on a smartphone today. But ultimately, the phone's purpose is in that communication. And so as you even look at church, the church needs to continue to change. But sometimes we get stuck like, no, I want it to be this way. And the purpose hasn't changed. The church is still to bring glory to God, to reach people for Jesus Christ, to train his people to do ministry. But yet we struggle when we change how that looks. And I think that's where I've seen a lot of that tension come, or maybe a generational gap.
We see this divide even in the church. But what are some real practical things that we can do between young people and old people to make sure that when people when they see Christians, they don't see necessarily young and old, but they see people that all serve the same God? So your ideas in that for this cultural problem that we even see in the church?
I think you have to step out of your comfort zone. I think that's the key. Like, you have to be willing to kind of bridge the gap and kind of step out of your comfort zone. One of my favorite things that we've done since we moved here, we went reverse trick-or-treating with our kids at one of the local nursing homes. And one of my favorite was just seeing my son Noble, who's 6, just talk to these older people and just love it, like just really enjoy it and really put himself out there. And it was just so great. Ask if he could pray for them, and then actually praying for them. Like just, it was an incredible experience. And I think for some of us, it's kind of that idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and kind of trying to look at something from their perspective. I think is so important. And I think just practical and making it more practical than just that idea that we've all heard before, but just, put yourself in situations where you have to interact with someone of a different generation. Like just go be intentional next time you're at church. Go say hi to somebody that you wouldn't normally say hi to.
I think that's such a great thing because we're such creatures of habit. I mean, typically you can look out and people sit in the same spot every week in the room, my pew or my seat in the room. Even I've seen it with events. Actually, I'm really grateful for ACC. I think obviously we try to represent our community, and obviously our community has young people, has older people in it. And so as a church, I think that's great. I've always been challenged, and I'm obviously getting older. That it's that element happens to all of us every day. It's getting gray. You guys cause it, and there's probably going to come a point in time where maybe what's the most relevant music style in church isn't something that I might be the biggest fan of. But somebody has challenged me, and you probably heard it before, but I want us to be a church that like my kids want to go to, or maybe it's your grandkids would want to show up to. Because as much as maybe we want to keep it how we like it, if that's not reaching that next generation, all we're doing is just setting it up for closure and failure and to come to an end. And I don't think that's what the church is, alive and active, and so it's got to continue. And so I think we've got incredible folks at ACC that we'll say are mature, and when it comes to age, and I love watching that. There's a certain couple that, man, they just get joy when they see like our students sitting towards the front in that 11 o'clock service. It just brings these guys energy, and they just love it. And they're an older couple, and they get encouraged by that. When they see young people getting baptized, it's like they'll always make a point to say that, and how that encourages them. I just love that mindset. And so I think we have to have a mindset of, again, it's not always going to be about me. It shouldn't be about us. And so how can I embrace that? How can I be intentional to get outside of my comfort zone? And maybe I'm a young person. Do I notice somebody that's maybe older in the room that I could stop and say hi to? Or if I'm that older person, maybe I'm the one that takes the initiation and goes and talks to a younger person. And even when events happen, we have such a tendency to gather with who we know. Push yourself outside of that and look for maybe that opportunity to engage with somebody in a different generation.
Well, that's it. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today on ACC Talk. We have 3 services this weekend. We have it at 9:30, 11, and 12:30 p.m. And so we would love to invite you to that. And what do we got going on this week?
Do we have anything going on this week?
There's always groups, man. Get in a group.
Always groups.
Yeah, small groups are going.
And I would say this, like we're probably 4 weeks into the semester at this point. It is not too late. Like even, I lead a couple of groups that are dependent on curriculum. So Freedom and Fresh Start, but I can help you catch up. Like it's not too late to start and to find a group. And so, and we have plenty of groups that they discuss the sermon series. And so you can jump in. They're not reliant on previous weeks. And because I think the important part is just finding those relationships and finding those people that are going to really help you grow in your faith.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, we're just hoping the weather kind of continues to be nice and dries out. We can get the second half of that portable building onto the property and maybe get both pieces in place and start that process.
Maybe join them together.
And start the remodel. And then obviously we got really excited that Zoe and Alyssa are really trying to be here at the beginning.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. They're trying to be here next week.
like by the end of the week. And so,
Yeah, so if you don't know, we've hired a new worship pastor, and he is hopefully going to be here next week. And so we're really excited for him coming.
yeah, I think they're trying to be getting into town around the 5th,
Cool.
5th, 6th. So
That's
it's gonna
cool.
be great.
If you see him at church, make sure you say hi.
Yeah.
Just welcome him like you guys did us, for sure.
For sure. Hey, thank you guys for joining us, and we will talk to you later. Oh, Dave half committed. He was like,
Not this week. I like how last week you left it in, like the whole thing.